Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this important information sharing webinar this afternoon. Again, my name is Ed Lambert. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. I want to welcome all of you here today. I want to thank our panelists for joining us, and I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, who will be joining us for the last quarter of this program to offer up some final and closing remarks. Our subject matter today involves one that we know is greatly important to the students of Massachusetts, and that is addressing some of the early literacy gaps that we see, particularly at the first grade level, with what is proving to be a data-driven strategy of great effect, and that is high-dosage tutoring. We're going to share some recent research and analysis of data with you today. We're going to hear from the Department of Education, Elementary and Secondary Education, with regard to their rollout of the first year of $25 million worth of grants to serve 10,000 young students across the Commonwealth. And we're also going to hear from the Center at Stanford University about what other states are doing to both scale up and keep high dosage tutoring sustainable within their states. But just a couple of introductory comments first. Liz, if you wouldn't mind moving the slides. Our organization, the Mass Business Alliance for Education, for those of you that don't know, is 35 years old, co-founded by Paul Revel and Jack Rennie. And it was really founded on the concepts of ensuring equity of access to opportunity and to high quality educational experiences for all students. And even though over the course of the last 35 years or so, educational innovation and technology has advanced, those core concepts of using data, bringing best practices to the classroom, being strong advocates as business leaders in support of educators, in support of families and opportunities for students has been key. And it's in that spirit, in that context, that supporting and advancing the idea of scaling up high dosage tutoring for our first graders in an attempt to try to address what we see as some of the gaps in early literacy across the Commonwealth, particularly in terms of the number of third graders who are not reading on grade level, how we might address that. We think this is a concept and a tool that has proven in a very short period of time to be very effective and very much in line with the history of our organization in wanting to advance these opportunities for students. Next slide. So we do represent over 43 affiliate organizations, 30,000 employers overall. Next slide. And in terms of setting the stage for today's conversation, where are we? Because an awful lot has happened in the last couple of years. And let me just speak quickly about what the current state of affairs is with regard to early literacy policy in Massachusetts. As many folks on the call probably already know, both the House and now the state Senate have adopted varying versions of legislation that would bring Massachusetts into a cadre of now what would be 43 states, requiring science of reading and evidence-based curricula with regard to early literacy in our classrooms. That legislation is off to a conference committee, and both branches will come to some final determination and send that legislation, we hope, in this session to the governor's desk. Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll and the administration also deserve a lot of credit 2 years ago, creating what is called the Literacy Launch Program and using some money from the fair share revenue stream to assist the transition to this high quality curriculum in districts across the Commonwealth. Currently, about half of our school districts are using high quality curriculum materials with regard to early literacy instruction. Helping in that transition is the Literacy Launch Initiative, which we'll also hear a little bit about today. And then last but not least, a year ago, the governor proposed and the House and Senate agreed to support $25 million in grant funding that DESE has disseminated to districts across the Commonwealth to support 10,000 young students with varying opportunities, depending on the model, to advance and accelerate their early literacy learning. The research you're going to hear today is very specific to one type of model, but certainly we're all very, very grateful for the governor's commitment, the legislature's support of these initiatives. Next slide. And so let me just close my introductory remarks and set the stage for what you're going to hear about today. These are the covers of two recent reports done, one more recent than the next, that not only builds off the research from the first report that shows the efficacy of these programs, but also showing that students who have moved on from the program are retaining those gains in the following year. And that's really exciting information. And so as a result, I'm going to turn the program over now to Amanda Neitzel. Amanda is with the Center for Research and Reform in Education at Johns Hopkins University. They've been doing a lot of this work, and it's this data that has been so impressive in terms of it's being communicated to the legislature and the administration has really formed the foundation for the level of support necessary to make this happen statewide. So, Amanda, thanks for joining us today, and we're going to let you present a little bit, and then I'm going to ask folks in the audience, if you have questions about Amanda's presentation, to please use the Q&A function to send them along, and we will collate them and have some opportunity to try to pose those questions to Amanda before she leaves us today. Thanks a lot. Amanda?
Thanks. Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Neitzel from, like Ed said, the Center for Research and Reform in Education. And today I'm here to present some quantitative findings from the most recent evaluation of Ignite Reading, a virtual literacy tutoring model that was implemented in Massachusetts. We're looking specifically at school year 24-25, so last year. And so over the next little bit of time, I'm going to summarize a little bit about our study design, the outcomes, persistence in the second grade, and some policy implications. So I'm going to start first. We've taken 3 different analytical approaches in this project. So I'm going to walk you through each one. So in this first one, we used a one group pre-test, post-test design. So what that means is we compared students' beginning of the year literacy benchmark scores to their end of the year scores to estimate the growth while they participated in Ignite Reading tutoring. So that lets us capture that within student change across the year. So this isn't a causal comparison, but it gives us a really good picture of how much do kids in this program typically gain, and then we can start to compare it with, well, how much do kids normally gain on this according to the assessments documentation. So who was included in this? Well, we had almost 1,600 students in first grade across 48 schools in 13 districts. So we've got a lot of Massachusetts covered. That the diversity of the sample really lets us look at outcomes across different contexts and across different student populations, which really help us think about how could this work in a lot of different places across the state. So what did we find when we are looking at just that one group and comparing it to how much we would expect? Well, on average, students who participated in Ignite Reading tutoring made gains equivalent to roughly 5 months of additional learning when we're comparing that to how much we would expect their average fall and spring scores to be on the DIBELS assessment. So put differently, their spring scores were higher than we would expect for just normal growth. That what's really exciting is that pattern was similar across different demographic groups, which suggests that this program really supports accelerating student learning broadly and not just on a specific, narrow subgroup of students. So this doesn't give us a causal estimate or something that compares to an analysis with a comparison group. It really shows a lot of significant, meaningful within student improvement. So what does that mean? We need to understand implementation because we know you can start with a good idea and that doesn't mean it's going to help kids. And we can see a lot about how this program was implemented across the state. So on average, students received roughly 35.8 weeks of tutoring with including about 33 instructional hours with an average attendance rate of 85%. So I want to say that again. The average attendance rate was 85%. That is very high. So I study a lot of tutoring programs. I read a lot of research of tutoring. That's on the upper end of the distribution. So the attendance and level of implementation in this study was very high. And it was the similar level last year. So that's actually a really important finding right now, is across 15, 1,600 students across a lot of schools, a lot of districts over 2 different years, that level of implementation was able to be maintained. So here, something else that's not surprising, but is worth emphasizing, is that the gains were larger for students who had higher attendance. So anyone who thinks about this would understand, yes, the more tutoring you receive, the more it will help you. But it's really important to think about, well, what does that mean when we're implementing these programs? So we saw students attending over 85% showed the strongest growth, while those with lower attendance saw smaller gains. So that dosage appears to be a key driver in these impacts. So in short, the benefits were highest among students who were attending the most regularly. So I want to talk a little bit about that benchmark movement. So students, when they're assessed in the fall, are identified as either being ready for core instruction, they don't need any additional support, strategic intervention, or intensive intervention. So those are students at the lowest level. For a tutoring model, you would expect most students at the beginning of the year to need some sort of intervention, which is what we see here. And however, by the end of the year, you can see most students are moving up. They're moving from intensive to strategic, strategic to core. In fact, 23% of students who started the year in the intensive risk category, so the very lowest category, moved to the core instructional level by the end of the year. So that means nearly 1 in 4 of the most at-risk students reached grade level benchmarks after tutoring. That's a meaningful shift in how students are performing in school, especially for those students who need the most support. So I want to talk about our second approach that we took for this, which was a more rigorous design where we formed a comparison group. So in districts that were using the DIBELS as their typical progress monitoring tool, we can match students within the district, so students who receive tutoring, to similar students who didn't receive tutoring, all within the same district. So we match them based on, their pretest scores, other things about students, demographics. So that really matching within districts helps us control for those district policies and helps us understand, well, how much is this actually moving the needle for these particular kids in these particular districts? And again, this is a more rigorous design. It meets that ESSA tier of evidence. So this gives us, we can start to move towards suggestive evidence. So this summarizes who was involved. So we've still got 37 schools across 9 districts with over 500 students, including both those who were tutored and those who were not. And here's the key finding. So overall, students who received Ignite Reading showed a significant impact with an effect size of 0.23 standard deviations. So that's quite impressive. And I'm going to put this all in context in 2 slides. I also want to point out here those subgroup effects to see, well, who is this working for? And they're positive across all of those major demographic groups. Everyone's doing just as well. English learners, still 0.23. We did see that students with IEP showed smaller positive estimates. That's something that's worth digging into, but they're still showing positive growth. So taken together, this really shows that even in this more rigorous design, we have confidence that Ignite Reading helped these students do better in school than students who didn't receive those supports. And again, we see dosage matters. So here we group those students by those same sort of categories of 85% or higher, 75 to 85%, or less than 75%. And we see a clear pattern. So those who have the more than 85% have the largest effect size. They have the largest impacts. They have significant impacts. We start to see those numbers drop for kids who aren't attending. They're not getting all of the tutoring that they need. In fact, students who are attending less than 75% of their sessions actually are not seeing any impacts. It says negative on here, but this is not statistically significant. So that just represents null findings. Those students are just doing the same as kids who aren't receiving any tutoring. So it really underscores the point that quality alone isn't enough. We need consistent participation in tutoring. And so schools and districts really need to work on those implementation supports that improve attendance and reduce all of those missed tutoring sessions. So I will say, to get to that 85%, Ignite Reading is doing a lot of work and support, but those schools and districts are also doing a lot to make that happen. So congratulations to everyone all around for doing a lot to help kids. I said 2 slides ago that I would help you understand what that 0.23 standard deviations means. I love a good effect size and standard deviations, but most people think, what does this even mean? What is she talking about? So here, this chart shows you some effect sizes for other common interventions. You can start to bracket and see where this fits. So first we have 0.24 is the average effect size of in-person tutoring conducted at scale from a recent systematic review and meta-analysis. So they looked across a lot of studies of in-person tutoring that was done at scale with about this size, and they found an effective 0.24. And so you can see Ignite Reading from this study is right up there. So this seems to be working as well as the average in-person tutoring model, which is very exciting. And you can see right on the other side of that, we show in the past, when we did studies of virtual tutoring, we found no real effects. This was not a way to help kids consistently or reliably. And then we've also added in typical averages from educational technology programs and even extending the school day. And you can see that tutoring is much higher than all of these other approaches. So it suggests that well-implemented high-dosage virtual tutoring can achieve meaningful impacts within schools. So with my last little bit of time, I want to describe how we assess persistence of gains into second grade. So we followed the cohort of students from the prior year who received tutoring in first grade to see how did they do at the end of second grade after they've left tutoring. So that included 740 students across 9 districts who received their tutoring in first grade and did tutoring at the end of first grade. And then we tracked to see how they were doing in second grade. And so the same core strategic and intensive intervention groups. Again, beginning of first grade, a lot of kids that need intervention. And then you can see in the middle at the end of first grade, we looked at all students who were exited from tutoring. Most of them have reached core instruction, which is very exciting. And then we looked at how they're doing at the end of second grade. They didn't receive any tutoring in second grade. And you can see many of them still staying at that grade level in that green bar. It's actually 85%. So 85% of the students who exited tutoring and reached grade level remained at grade level at the end of second grade without additional Ignite Reading. So that really talks a little bit about this isn't just short-term impacts that fade away. If we get them to grade level by the end of first grade, they mostly stay there for the end of second grade. These results really line up a great deal with what we found in the first year of this study. Ed showed you 2 different report covers. Similar impacts in the 2-group analysis and similar patterns of movement from those kids in intensive moving up to core. So replication is always amazing to see. You didn't just do it one year, you did it with a whole new set of kids in the next year. So just to quickly wrap up a few policy implications, and I think Massachusetts is actually doing a lot of work with all of this, which is exciting to see. So prioritizing early intervention, first grade seems to be a critical window for this. If we can get them to grade level by the end of first grade, they seem to be okay. Second, we really need to be tracking those early literacy benchmarks and reporting those out to see which schools are doing well with this, which schools need additional supports. Third, just investing in those high dosage scalable models that are aligned with the science of reading and have all of the supports to ensure adequate dosage are key. And then finally, thinking about if students are maintaining their gains, perhaps we can cycle them out and put somebody else in that seat so that we can really help extend the impact here. And before I turn it back, I want to thank you for your attention. You can grab my email address there if you want to shoot me any questions. And I think in the chat, we're going to try to put the link to that second report, which is the one that I talked about all day. So I'm going to turn this back over to you, Ed, for the next speaker.
Oh, well, no, you actually stay with us, Amanda,
that's
because
right.
I want to try to offer you up some questions and offer some clarifications as well. It's clear to me that based on a couple of the questions in the Q&A, that we should make clear that your research is based on model of high dosage tutoring in Massachusetts that emanated from the philanthropically funded Ignite program across was it 13 districts and maybe 46 schools that was funded
Hmm.
by the One8 Foundation. So it is a very specific model. There are other models that might currently be being funded through the state grant program. But these results speak specifically to that model, which, to answer another question that was in the chat, is differentiated by the fact that it's 15 minutes a day, delivered virtually, I believe, right? Those are all of the characteristics of the model the Ignite
Hmm.
model that you looked at, and that they are delivered every day, right, to students as long as they're qualified over the course of the year. Because I do believe there was another question about the dosage hours and things like that. So that would mean what, about an hour or to an hour and 15 minutes a week, I guess, right? So let me know if I've mischaracterized the program at all, but those are the specifics with regard to the model, I believe, right? That you looked at. And I should also point out that as a result of that targeted funding, those funds went to schools and districts that had already adopted high quality early literacy curriculum, which aligns with this model of high dosage tutoring, and also had large percentages, I believe at least a minimum of 50% of their students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, either at the school level and or the district level. So did I get all those characteristics, program characteristics right?
Yes, that all
Okay.
sounded correct.
Okay.
I
Um,
was looking through the questions. There's a lot of good questions here.
yeah, no, there are. So one of the questions is about attendance. Can you drill down on that a little bit? Do you have any insight as to why attendance was so strong in the program?
Ooh, in the first year of this study, we included a pretty comprehensive qualitative component. And so that I think really digs into a lot of what people found. Um, One of the things that I think is great is that the model has a lot of connections with the school districts, and they have something called district champions and school champions. So people are receiving information about this attendance throughout the year so that they can actually identify where there are problems and address it in real time. So nobody's waiting until May to suddenly realize, wow, our average attendance was only 65%. So people are tracking this in an ongoing fashion throughout the year to figure out who's attending, who's not attending, what do we need to do to get them there. So I think a lot of that is Ignite partnering with all of these districts and schools to make sure that they have the information about who needs to be there, who isn't showing up. And then the schools are actually doing the work to make sure, well, what do we need to do for this kid to make sure they're there?
Great, thanks. I should also point out too that there was one question about whether or not districts who participated are getting this data broken out by district, and I do believe that they are being
Yes,
provided that by
we
1/8,
shared that
correct?
last year, and I have it for this year. When we presented to the districts, they requested the fancy Sankey diagrams. So I've been working through getting all of those Sankey diagrams for each of the districts.
One
It's harder
one
to look at sometimes district by district because we start to get very small sample sizes. But yeah,
Sure. One very specific question involves students with disabilities. In layman's terms, what does it mean to have a positive effect of 0.07 for students?
that's very small. I will say 0.07, like we showed in the other thing, that's sometimes what you see around extending the school day or using certain kinds of ed tech interventions. I know in layman's terms it's really, really difficult to show. I will also say 0.07 wasn't statistically significant. So I could translate 0.07 means this many points, but since it wasn't statistically significant, that means the confidence intervals are very wide. So functionally we would say, well, we're not sure, nothing there is statistically significant. um, I know that that feels like I'm not answering the question, but with such a small sample size we need more students. So we've been
Sure.
thinking about, can we pool those with each of the years together to see if we can get a large enough sample size to really understand what's happening there.
Sure. Do we know if any of the 85% of second graders received any interventions that uh, kept them on benchmark?
No, we don't have that information from schools, but I will say most of those students were on benchmark at the beginning of second grade. So I would be surprised if schools were giving them intensive intervention when they're flagging as being on grade level.
Yeah. And then there are a couple of questions about long-term data, and my guess is that that's still data that is to be collected.
Hmm.
Um, to Desi's credit, they're going to be engaging and continuing an ongoing evaluation, comparing different models. Again, this model is the model that you've collected data on, but there will be opportunities to the extent there are other models being funded by the 25 million, if the sample size is sufficient, to be able to do some comparative analysis, I would imagine, with regard to which models are providing the greater return on investment.
Yeah, but it's tricky because different models sort of fit different needs for districts. And so even then when you're comparing them, it's like this model chose this type of, or this district chose this type of model for a particular reason. This district chose a different model for a different reason. So we'll get to see some of those, how effective were they for different districts, but sometimes it's about fit too.
I
So,
understand.
but yes, we'll have information about all those different models.
There is a question about training and what training does it take to make a tutor effective, but maybe I'll save that question for our next speaker, given that I think you're dealing primarily with the data that's been presented. But one question is, how you define technology as represented by the 0.10 effect size? Isn't Ignite dependent on technology?
Yes, that comes from a systematic review that I conducted several years ago. Ed tech programs in that case are the types of supplemental interventions that don't include additional human supports. So yes, Ignite Reading does rely on technology, but is primarily a tutoring model that is delivered using technology. So there would be too many humans involved to really classify it as, sort of human removed educational technology that's mainly just supplemental and a student engaging with a computer program or some other sort of technology.
Sure. There are a number of other questions here about the model itself and the like, and I'm going to move on, but still see if we can have an opportunity to address some of these questions as the program goes forward with our various speakers. But again, to reiterate, the logistics of the Ignite model that the JHU data has analyzed is that it's during the school day, it's 15 minutes a day, it's delivered virtually in the classroom. We can talk a little bit more about that. Maybe Catherine can as well. But it is one model and maybe the predominant model. And Ignite is not the only provider, by the way, that can deliver that model. So I should point that out as well. But Amanda, I want to thank you for your time today and for this work. It's very encouraging, and we will stay connected with you as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker. Catherine Tarka is with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. She is the Director of Literacy and Humanities for DESE. She is a lifelong literacy educator. She's been in the classroom. She's been a nonprofit leader. She's been an adjunct professor in this work, a literacy coach and the like. And all of that really, I think, makes her very uniquely qualified to help lead this effort at the state level, particularly when you are handed an appropriation kind of at the last minute and told to get money out the door, which DESE did to its great credit with Catherine's leadership this year to make sure that this money was going to be spent effectively. So we're really pleased to have Catherine with us. And Catherine, let me turn the program over to you so that you can talk a little bit about the dissemination of that and maybe start to address some of the questions that have been asked, both with regard to analysis of data going forward and model types and things like that.
All right. Thank you so much, Ed. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yep.
All right, great. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And my name is Catherine Tarka. As Ed said, I lead the Office of Literacy and Humanities at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which we call DESE. I'm really excited to be here today to tell you about the statewide early literacy tutoring program that DESE coordinates. Here at DESE, you can actually stay on that first slide. Here at DESE, we started coordinating a statewide early literacy tutoring program way back in 2020. At that time, tutoring was getting a lot of national attention as a promising strategy very early in the pandemic as a way to help children continue learning to read and hopefully learn to read on time, even though we were operating in remote instruction that year. As a state, Massachusetts was on the early end to begin implementing a statewide tutoring initiative. We were funding and coordinating tutors to work with students in our schools all around the state within the first 12 months of the pandemic. And then even after our schools reopened for in-person instruction, there were continuing concerns that learners had fallen behind reading benchmarks in much larger numbers than we had typically seen. And so state leadership decided to continue investing in tutoring, and we've been doing it ever since. Ever since we started coordinating the statewide tutoring program, we've used a model that's pretty unique among other states. Our approach is that at the state level, we invite tutoring providers to apply to be part of our program. State specialists vet those applications and approve tutoring providers based on their demonstrated program quality. So we actually have a number of approved tutoring providers here in Massachusetts. Each of our approved providers uses their own unique model and unique approach, but they have all shown evidence of effectiveness. And then once they are approved, the providers are eligible to be matched with schools here in Massachusetts that want to receive early literacy tutoring. DESE matches the schools with the tutoring providers based on the model that will work best in their local context. And tutors then work with students that are identified by the school as not meeting reading benchmarks and requiring additional support, and DESE picks up the tab. Let's go to the next slide. As a state, we began studying and publishing student impact results of our tutoring program in 2022. And our statewide early literacy tutoring program across the entire population of students that have been tutored has been shown to accelerate student learning. So as you can see from one example here, this is a summary of the results of our statewide tutoring program from school year 22-23. And in that year, you can see we saw a substantial increase in students meeting reading benchmarks after participating in the state coordinated tutoring program. Next slide, please. As Ed alluded to, the state legislature did appropriate $25 million for the statewide early literacy tutoring program for this current year, school year 25-26. This is a really significant expansion from the scope of the program in past years. This year, we're so excited to be supporting tutoring in around 330 schools located in 91 different districts. This year, we will be able to offer tutoring to over 10,000 students. The majority of those students are in first grade. And this program gives priority to first grade children because of the critical importance of first grade in the trajectory of learning to read. And in the data that Dr. Neitzel just shared, we saw that there is a special element of effectiveness for future academic achievement when we can reach children when they're in first grade. Next slide, please. This year, DESE is really pleased to be partnered with 5 different tutoring providers that have been approved for our program. And each of these organizations is working with schools throughout Massachusetts. So we have on our list this year, Amplify, Catapult, Ignite, On Your Mark, and Springboard. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that each of our 5 approved tutoring providers offers a different model. So schools really have a lot of choice in terms of what conditions and what approaches will best suit their needs and their local context. As you can see, there are a lot of options to choose from as the tutoring providers' models really vary. They vary in terms of the frequency of tutoring, the group size, when it's scheduled, the lesson time, the approach to staffing, and the delivery method of tutoring. Given all of these variables, the most common model being implemented currently in our statewide program is the 5 days per week, 15 minutes per day virtual model that is being offered by Ignite. Next slide, please. Our statewide tutoring program has generated high demand from our school districts really since the beginning. As you can see here from some of our application numbers for the current school year, this past summer, we invited schools and districts to apply for tutoring services, and we received applications from 121 districts and charter schools. This past fall, we opened up the application again for another round, and we received an additional 69 districts that applied. So altogether, that's about 190 local education agencies that asked to receive tutoring this year. That includes traditional school districts as well as collaboratives and charter schools. And that's about half of all local education agencies in Massachusetts that serve grades K-3. Next slide, please. So with all that demand, the team here at DESE did have a tough job to select which schools and districts would receive tutoring under this program. Even though a very robust amount of funding was appropriated, the demand outstripped the capacity, and we weren't able to support tutoring in every school and district that requested it. So we used a specific set of criteria to evaluate the school's applications and select the schools that would receive tutoring. Some of the criteria that were used included use of high quality instructional materials in grades K to 3, the presence of a high quality early literacy model, the percentage of students classified as high need, and the ELA literacy MCAS scores in grade 3. High quality early literacy model, that criterion was weighted the most heavily because the budget appropriation language actually required that this program can only be open to schools and districts that have adopted a high quality evidence-based reading instructional model. And I'm quoting that from the legislation. About half of the districts that were ultimately selected for tutoring serve an above average proportion of students classified as high needs. So in essence, the population of students receiving statewide tutoring roughly mirrors the state overall in terms of the percentage of high need students. Next slide, please. So I just want to wrap up by talking a little bit about how we're evaluating the impact of our statewide tutoring program. We're very pleased to be partnering with the experts at Johns Hopkins, including Dr. Neitzel, who spoke earlier today, to evaluate the impact of our statewide tutoring initiative. We collect literacy data from every single participating student using the DIBELS assessment. They are pre-tested and post-tested before and after they receive tutoring. And in addition, we gather qualitative insights from individuals involved with tutoring, including the tutors, the teachers, the administrators in the participating schools. And we're going to be asking some, we think, really interesting questions, including, do the impacts of tutoring on student achievement vary across student subgroups? To what extent do the outcomes vary based on tutoring model? How do the tutor characteristics and tutor perceptions relate to quality and student outcomes? As Ed referenced earlier, we're asking these questions so that we can continuously improve our program and put the highest quality tutoring services into schools. As we answer these questions, we can understand what's really working for Massachusetts students, understand why it's working, and apply that to future decisions, including decisions about which tutoring models and providers will be approved and which ones will be prioritized for Massachusetts schools. And with that, I'll wrap up my presentation, and happy to answer any questions that have come up.
Thanks, Catherine. I've been monitoring the Q&A. I would say, and I really appreciate that information and all the effort that you and the team at DESE made to get this money out the door this year, and the clarity you've provided here today as well. And a couple of the questions or comments speak to this last point that you made about evaluation going forward. A couple of folks have had some thoughts or suggestions with regard to opportunities to assess. And what I'm going to do is encourage folks to reach out to MBAE. We will pass this information on to Catherine, or you can email Catherine, I suppose, directly at DESE if you want to do that. But my email is elambert@mbae.org. Everyone's going to get a follow-up email to this anyway, so we'll put that contact information in there. But feel free to offer your thoughts and suggestions. I think there's some really good analysis that's been provided by some in the Q&A section with regard to evaluation and the like. So we'll pass that on. I also want to just address a couple of things, a few of the questions that have come in that aren't germane necessarily to any one of our particular speakers, and there is no one here from Ignite. I can't speak for other providers, but I do know that in our experience, there's pretty extensive training that is required of the tutors delivering the virtual content in the Ignite model. There's constant and continual assessment. There's even oversight that often occurs in audit-like fashion with regard to some of the sessions overall. So if I recall, there's a minimum of at least 60 hours of instruction and certification that are required of each of the tutors. And so I think it's important to note that at least in that model, I can speak to the fact that there is a fair amount of training and then ongoing assessment to make sure that the content is being delivered effectively. One of the questions in the chat was, does virtual tutoring sometimes requires folks on person or in person to be able to keep students on task? I've not seen that at all in what's been delivered. It's not required as part of the Ignite model, and yet you're still seeing these really great results. But the fact that there is a live tutor that is assigned for the entire school year to that student, they build a relationship, they get to know those students, and it's pretty amazing when you walk into a room of first graders, 20 of whom have headphones on and they have their Chromebooks, and they're all engaged one-on-one with a tutor who knows personally where each of them is at and has them engaged. I've not seen a single instance in so many of the classroom visits that we've done where a youngster needs to be guided outside the one-on-one relationship they have with that virtual tutor. So it's a really great model, and I would encourage folks, as MBAE continues to host visits, if folks are interested, you can let us know if you might be interested in joining one of those sessions. But anyway, Catherine, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and we're going to move on to our next presenter. Thank you very much. And now it's also a great pleasure for me to bring to you another voice who's really going to help us understand a bit more of the national perspective with regard to the efforts that states have made to both launch, but even more importantly, sustain. And I know that there's one question in the Q&A about sustainability of these programs. Kathy Bendheim is the Strategic Advising Director at the SCALE Initiative for Stanford University. And I would, under normal circumstances, congratulate her for being out in the sunny West Coast, but I think she might actually be next door in Rhode Island. Is that right?
That is right. I'm covered in snow, just like you are.
So, Kathy, let me turn it over to you for your contribution to the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. It's really an honor to be here and be part of this effort to support literacy in Massachusetts. As Ed mentioned, I am Kathy Bendheim with the National Student Support Accelerator. We're a program out of Stanford University that's focused on expanding access to high-impact tutoring, or what we've been talking about today is high-dosage tutoring. But we do that through conducting research, using that research to create tools and provide strategic advising and educational opportunities to support districts and states to implement this type of tutoring more easily. So we don't operate any tutoring programs. Next slide, please. And I'd like to do just start with a quick review of what the model we've been talking about today. One strong example is the Ignite program that Amanda's been talking about, and the others as well, Springboard and the others that were mentioned by Catherine. But just a quick review, the key components of high impact tutoring or high dosage tutoring is that the tutors are consistent and well-trained. Instruction is multiple times per week using high quality instructional materials. It's integrated and coherent with the student's school day. And student academic progress data is used to inform the instruction. So it's not homework help. And it can be challenging to implement with fidelity into the school day. But what we have seen is that once effective tutoring programs get started, the results drive ongoing demand. Next slide, please. And speaking of results, I know the study that was just discussed had really significant results, 0.3. Effect size is huge. But rarely in research do we have so much evidence that points to the promise of a specific approach. This chart right here shows the average effect size from 7 different meta-analyses. So each group of columns represents one meta-analysis that together include over 150 randomized control trials, which are systematic research studies of program effects that do a really good job of isolating the real impact of the program on the student's learning. But the main message is, as you can see, these studies show positive effects of tutoring across grade levels and subject areas, with effects in most cases ranging from 3 months to more than a year of additional learning. And additionally, as research continues, we're finding that this type of tutoring also improves student engagement and attendance and is expanding the educator pipeline. All great spillover effects. Next slide, please. And in addition to the research, now we actually have a good number of proof points across the nation, including many right here in Massachusetts, that demonstrate that this type of tutoring can work across many different contexts. We do an annual round of interviews with state leaders. Last year, we found that over half of states have statewide tutoring policies or programs. Additionally, from a national survey, over 40% of schools provide high-impact tutoring. And 90% of those report that their tutoring is effective. And just last week, a national poll from 50CAN found that 86% of parents are in favor of public funding for tutoring for students who are behind. And in Massachusetts, specifically, that number is even higher at 87%. Next slide, please. So now that we're seeing these great benefits and these great success stories on high impact tutoring, the question becomes, what can we do to expand access and sustain it? And through our work, we're seeing states providing a wide range of supports for districts, similar to Massachusetts, providing a vetted tutoring provider list, and other states as well. They provide tutoring guidance, curriculum, learning convenings, design sprints, and more. But today, I want to focus specifically on policy and funding approaches. As you can see, states are taking a variety of approaches to expanding and sustaining high-impact tutoring. And I'm only sharing a few examples, and I am watching the time, so I'm going to be very quick on this part. Some states have policy mandates requiring high-impact tutoring for certain student groups. It started out as a way to address COVID learning, but we're finding that because they've been successful, they are continuing, or they're doing their best to continue and sustain these. Some states, including Massachusetts, have competitive grant programs, as was just discussed, funded through state funding. And some of those also have a match, a financial match that the district is required to put up, which can provide a good runway for districts to build in the financial costs over time. Another approach is building funding for tutoring into the state funding formula. Tennessee includes about $500 specifically for tutoring for each fourth grade student who is below proficiency. That's one of the other, and then the final approach I'm covering here is that some states are building tutoring into a broader early literacy policy. So it's not really seen as an add-on tutoring program, but it's an integral part of the broader strategy. So in some cases, it's a requirement. Certain students are required to get tutoring in Louisiana, Tennessee, if they're in, if they don't meet certain benchmarks. And then we've also seen approaches like Oregon's Early Literacy Success Act, in which it's a recommended action, but not a required action to provide tutoring for students in those groups. So now, I'd like, if you can move to the next slide, a couple of emerging strategies that are super interesting. One is the 3% Title I direct student services set aside. I think you're going to be hearing more about this. This was enacted in 2017, a while ago. The federal government created an option for states to withhold up to 3% of Title I funding for what they're calling direct student services, which means that the funds have to be spent on the students. They can't be spent for items like professional development. And few states have exercised this option, but we're seeing some states consider it now for tutoring. In particular, Virginia will be launching their tutoring program. They will be launching that program in the next fall, or this coming fall, I guess, for that's focused on tutoring. Another emerging option is tutor apprenticeship programs. Registered tutor apprenticeship programs can open up funding opportunities through workforce development sources. So providing tutors with an opportunity to become highly skilled while earning an income, as well as providing great tutors for students. So in New Jersey's case, the apprenticeship program is operated by a nonprofit that partners with school districts to provide them with well-trained and supervised tutors. And many of those tutors are moving on from their tutor apprentice program to a teacher apprenticeship program. So it's expanding their pipeline too. Finally, outcomes-based contracting. It doesn't directly fund tutoring, but it is a method of contracting with tutoring providers in which the district is paying based on agreed upon student outcomes rather than the number of tutoring sessions provided. And by establishing the sort of mutual accountability for student outcomes before the tutoring begins, it really supports strong implementation. Florida is moving towards that. California is hosting a cohort of that this fall. So that's another approach you're going to be hearing more about. So those are the approaches I wanted to just touch on. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to mention, Massachusetts really has a great opportunity right now. As we know, still an urgent need to improve early literacy skills. We know this type of tutoring works. We know it works for your students right here in Massachusetts. You already have this strong foundation of research, proof points, supporters. So Massachusetts truly is poised to be a model for high impact tutoring success. And I just strongly encourage you to continue building on this great work. And I look forward to following your progress. And now I believe I get to turn it back over to Ed. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you so much. That was great, condensed, clear, but really important for us to have a conversation about where the state can go. And I want to thank you for that. We'll engage you further as we have more of these conversations, but your work has been very helpful to us and provides a great segue for me to introduce our final speaker. It is a great pleasure for me to let you all know that we are joined by our state's Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, who amazingly has found the time while she's the liaison to cities and towns trying to dig themselves out from this latest storm, has still found the time to be with us here today. And so we're very grateful for that. So, Lieutenant Governor, if you're with us, I want to ask you to join us and bring you onto the screen. And if you're not, then I will tap dance for a minute or two while you're out helping someone else shovel out of their driveway. But again, what we've heard here is really important, and a couple of the questions in the Q&A have focused on both the sustainability question and whether or not the investment will continue. It's a pleasure for me to be able to say that the Healy-Driscoll administration, in a recent budget filing, has once again repeated its commitment to high-dosage tutoring with a $25 million allocation to the state budget for next year. And so we're looking for, hopefully, with House and Senate approval, at least another year of state support. Desi's work and Catherine's work in terms of assessing this year's results and helping to define the best way to deploy resources next year, I think will be really helpful. So I've said some wonderful things, Lieutenant Governor, about you while you were briefly detained. We know that you're in the middle of still statewide snow removal. Not like we don't need a little help down here in Fall River, by the way, just letting you know. But
you hit the jackpot when it came to snow. We did
hit the jackpot, but you guys have been incredibly busy and active, and for you to spend a few moments with us today on this topic is really something we're very grateful for. And as I was just telling the audience, it was a little over 2 years ago that you and Governor Healy announced the Literacy Launch initiative, supporting districts to transition to high quality curriculum, and follow that up this past year, and now with your most recent budget proposal with a further commitment to high dosage tutoring. We've had some speakers today display some great evidence of the efficacy of those programs and new data that show the gains being retained by second graders. It's just awesome news. But clearly you've placed your bets in the right place, and we are very grateful. So without further ado, let me let you bring this program home and offer you an opportunity to address our audience. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, and for all the work that you're doing and helping us advocate for so many important improvements in education. You know, I think in Massachusetts, we pride ourselves on being home to the best public education system in the country, but pride alone doesn't teach a child to read. And certainly, while we have success in a lot of areas, we also know we have growing inequities within the space of education. And that's why this tutoring program, and high dosage tutoring in particular, is so impactful and something that we're investing in. We know the importance of literacy by third grade, like the single strongest predictor of long-term academic success, graduation rates, and even just, future earnings. And we really felt it was important for us to ensure, post-COVID in particular, that our youngsters were getting the best chance possible at reading proficiently by the end of third grade. We know that if you have strong literacy skills, you know, everything else you're doing in school, math, science, social studies, like reading is such a foundation. Felt like it was important that we take into account how these resources could be best used. And I do want to give a shout out to Joanna Jacobs and her team, who did some early pilots in Massachusetts that really showed, wow, starting at these younger ages with high dosage tutoring is really delivering in our gateway cities, in places that have a vast range of students, ELL learners, lower income students, as well as students who do quite well and come from great wealth. It's quite a range, and high dosage tutoring really helped with you know, all of those populations. And for us, I'll also say it's a chance to invest in something that isn't just a buzzword. You know, there's a lot of things post-COVID folks are trying to invest in and think about. For us, this is truly an evidence-based strategy. It provides consistent small group or one-on-one supports multiple times per week. It builds those relationships. You know, that social capital we know is really important. It can help build the confidence and, most importantly, the skills for our youngest learners to be excellent readers. Unlike some of the one-off interventions, and there's a whole list of those. If anyone, I've chaired a school committee like Ed. I did that for 17 years. Know about some of the investments that we made that did work and some that didn't. This model in particular is an intervention that provides that sustained support that really accelerates learning. The catch-up speed was, I think, the most eye-opening, especially for students who, you know, fell behind during the pandemic or the struggles we've seen coming out of that. You know, we as an administration have supported high dosage tutoring in 227 schools across the Commonwealth. We're really targeting those early grades, grades 1 through 3, the years that we think really matter the most for literacy development. We've ensured that tutoring could both be in person or virtual, so schools can kind of meet students where they're at or where their ability to foster new programs is at. And that is happening in both rural communities, in gateway cities, and urban districts. I think the investment really reflects our belief that zip codes should not be a determinant about your reading level. I think this really matters now because we know from some of the recent assessment data that too many students are still not reading at grade level. This is not just in Massachusetts, this is across the country. And if we fail to intervene early, we're obviously going to spend a lot more later on, whether it's remediation, dropout prevention, and workforce training. I put this in the category of like, when you know better, you do better. Also partners well with some of the investments we're making in early literacy, our literacy launch tied to evidence-based, science-based reading curriculums. We're really excited about the work that we're doing in that space in helping us address making sure we're giving students our best shot at being not only terrific readers, but terrific students who have good outcomes in schools, which lead to good outcomes later in life. So for us, as we think about the strong innovation economy we have here in Massachusetts, high dosage tutoring is not just an education strategy, it's also an economic development strategy. We know that this is going to help prepare all of our students to participate in the Massachusetts economy. And, you know, closing these equity gaps is really critical to us. And high dosage tutoring supports students who have, you know, equity as a challenge or where these opportunity gaps exist. It supports our multilingual learners. Students with learning differences also can be well served by this approach, and certainly families who may not have had the time or resources to provide supplemental help at home. We know this is an investment that can really lead to better outcomes. So we're grateful to be in a state that has the resources. We put $25 million in. We've got another $25 million in the supplemental budget that was just submitted. And again, high dosage tutoring is targeted, it's measurable, it's accountable. We can track growth in reading fluency, comprehension, and just the confidence that our youngsters are showing when it comes to reading. And at a moment in time when the federal government is pulling funding and we don't exactly have the same type of partner, it's more important that states make these investments exactly the kind of high impact, high return on investment that we try and prioritize here in Massachusetts. So grateful for the work that you all are doing to expand and sustain this work. It's critical that this not just happen here, but that we continue to have the backing and the advocacy and learn from, you know, how we do this and do this well. And proud to be from a state that really believes every child in Massachusetts deserves the chance to walk into fourth grade ready, not behind, ready to read and not behind. So thank you so much for all that you're doing to help assist districts and states in putting these resources together. It's making a big difference.
Governor, thank you for your work. Thank Governor Healy for us. Great choice, by the way, in Stephen Shrike as the next Secretary of Education. love Pat
concur.
Cutweiler. He was a great partner, but we're looking forward to working with him as well. And thank you very much. Thanks for the leadership, and we'll let you get back to the governing work that we know is so important to us. But we really appreciate these investments and your leadership and what you bring to the table on this. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. Keep up the great work. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our attendees for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. You'll be getting a follow-up email with the materials that were shared and with contact information that you can use to weigh in on some of the research items or any questions that you have that you want to follow up with on us. But we appreciate you spending an hour with us today on this important topic, and we look forward to the conversations to come. Thank you all very much.